Hi everyone, I am Payal and I welcome everyone in my today's class wherein we'll go forward with the chapter 4th of our economic survey. So basically we are done with the 3 of the chapters and today we'll see about the prices and inflation. And we all know that prices refers to what? The price of your goods and services. Similarly, if I talk about inflation, so in general language or I would say in common language we call it mehengai. Mehengai is what? If the prices are increased, that is called, if there is inflation in the market. So increase in the prices over the period of time, we call the situation as inflation. But now in this particular survey, I would say in this particular chapter, we'll see that what is the condition or what has been the condition of the prices of the goods and services. We have various, I would say, bifurcation of inflation as well. So we will see that what is the proper data, and just like every video, I am to ensure here that we have a lot of data here. We'll one by one we'll see it, and whatever terms and terms and terminologies that are there that you should get to know, I'll dictate them, and simultaneously I'll go with the entire data. So before starting, I always say to you that this is the scanner of our Telegram channel. We keep on posting things here. So of course you can scan it and you can join the channel. Now you can see here that we are going to talk about the prices and inflation, that is understanding the dynamics. Now you can see that the first the definition we have is global inflation trends. Now you have various stages of inflation, as in that if I talk about specifically about India, we talk about India's inflation rate. Similarly, if I talk about the entire country, about the globe, amalgamating all of the countries here, so you will see that we are talking about the global inflation. Now we'll see the things taking care of the pandemic period as well, that what were the after effects of the pandemic period, and how are things going ahead. So basically we'll see the entire report card of inflation here. Okay, so if you see the global inflation trend, so you can see here that the inflation peaked in 2022. Now I told you that we'll see the after effects of COVID-19 as well. So 2022 is the after effect of what? The policies of the central banks that were taken at the time of the pandemic. So this is the case here. Now you can see, because the reason that is given here, the reason that your survey has given here is due to supply chain disruptions and your geopolitical tensions. Okay. Now I told you that the supply chain disruption is one of the reasons, and we of course know that there is a lot of geopolitical tensions going on. Similarly, if I talk about various fights, for example, you have Ukraine and the rest of the things that are involved in Russia as well. So you have this entire thing, or I would say a lot of this particular fight, or I would say this geopolitical tension creates further impact on your trade and the connections as well. So this is the entire case here. I would say what is the reason that has been given in the survey. Now you have India's financial scenario, or I would say the India's inflation scenario. Here we talked about global perspective. Here we'll talk about India. So you can see here the retail inflation. Now you have two types of inflations. One you have is WPI, which is your that is a particular index. But if I talk about inflation, so you have your wholesale inflation as well. Similarly, you have retail inflation as well. Wholesale, as in you could have seen, or you could have heard about the wholesale market, where you go and you purchase goods in you purchase goods in bulk, and you get those goods at a lower price if you compare it with the retail one. Similarly, if you talk about the retail one, you purchase goods from that market, but you purchase those goods, but at a limited you purchase limited quantity, but the price you get that is on MRP. So this is the case here. Similarly, if I talk about retail inflation, that eased in financial year 2025 due to the government and RBI measures, core inflation hit a decade low. Now here we have further bifurcation. Of course, we have a lot of bifurcations of your inflation, but famous two are, or I would say important two are, one is your core, next is your headline inflation. If I talk about core, the fluctuation, or I would say if I particularly talk about food, that is what? That is volatile, that have volatile prices. It keeps on changing day to day. So excluding it, whatever the amount or of the goods and services that is there, that is referred to as is core inflation. So excluding those items who have core, or I would say who have volatile prices. Similarly, if I talk about the headline inflation, that includes goods which have volatile prices. So this is the the major difference between your core inflation and the headline inflation. Next, if you see, we talk here about food inflation. So food inflation specifically, they've talked about onion and tomato prices. So if you see here the case here, so you could have seen that in every week, I would say the tomato, or I would say the prices of tomato and onion gets changed just because of the supply and demand, how supply and demand runs in the market. So various of the times you could have heard that there is a less of supply from from back, or from backside. So generally shopkeepers give you a reason that the supply is not getting matched with the demand, so that leads to what? That leads to increase in the price. So tomato and onion is something whose prices are really very volatile in nature, and it keeps on decreasing or increasing day by day, or I would say every week. So this is the situation here. So price has hiked due to production decline, and that is the if I talk about the reasons, so reasons that has been given is extreme weather and monsoon disruption. This is the case of every year. Next, you have pulses. So despite being a major producer, India faces a demand-supply gap, which is the case here. And if I talk about the volatility of prices, that is entirely dependent upon your demand and supply also. So if there is a mismatch between demand and supply, of course your prices will be affected. And if both are matched, which is very hypothetical situation, your prices will be adequate. Similarly, if I talk about the government interventions here, so if in case of procurement, or if in case of vegetables, so you can see the procurement, buffer stocking and subsidized sales to the in stabilizing the prices. Now in order to you can see it as a measure of stabilizing the prices. Now government does what? Government procures, or I would say a buffer stock has been kept by the government of India, so that whenever there is a disruption, or I would say mismatch in the demand supply, so that we can I would say we can lose, or bring that supply in the market to match the demand and supply, so that our prices also become adequate in manner. This is how these are the one of the methods that has been taken by the government of India to make, or I would say to stabilize the prices. Now this was the case of vegetables, as in we talked about onion and tomato. Now we'll jump on to the pulses. So pulses includes your stock limits, subsidized retail rates, and relax in the import policies. Okay. Now we'll talk about the importance of inflation understanding. Why is it important to understand the inflation, or why is inflation important? So you can see here that inflation poses various of challenges for the policymakers and the public. Central bank globally are cautiously easing restrictive policies to balance the inflation control with the economic recovery. Okay. Now you'll see in India, if I specifically talk about India, so government is taking various of the initiatives, and monetary policies help in manage the inflation. Now if I talk about inflation, or I would say the monetary policies, these are the activities that are linked to RBI. Everyone should know this. Okay. And RBI, if I talk about specifically about RBI stabilizing the economy, or I would say economic growth is one of the main objectives of the RBI. So if in case of stabilizing the prices, stabilizing the the economic growth, if I talk about the financial growth as well, so this is the entire thing that has been taken care by the RBI. So you can see here. Now if I talk about the global inflation trend, so you can see if in case I talk about 2022, so it peaked at 8.7%. Okay. Similarly, it is driven by the reasons have been also the reasons also have been given. So you can see here that it is driven by your supply chain disruption. Okay. Next reason is your geopolitical tension. This was the entire case of 2022 after the pandemic was over. Now it declined in 2024. The rate is 5.7% again due to policy interventions. The reason has been given as due to policy interventions. Now if I talk about the retail inflation, it reduced from 5.4% to 4.9% in financial year 2025, despite food price challenges are also there. Now again, behind it there are several reasons. One, I told you about the after effects of COVID-19. Next, you have supply chain disruption, which is again after effect of COVID-19 plus your geopolitical tension. So these are the reasons have been given here. Now if I talk about food items that make up 40% of the India's consumer price index, that make consumer food price index key inflation determinant. Now you have two types of indexes here, two famous types of indexes here in inflation. One is your CPI, another one is your WPI. So specifically, if I talk about consumer price index, they talk about what? They talk about they talk about the goods and services that are there in the retail market. If we talk about your WPI, if I talk about the your wholesale price index, that specifically takes care of the goods and services that are not services. Specifically, if we talk about goods, they what are there in the the wholesale market, that is the entire case. Now you take care of the thing of CFPI, so you will get to know that here we are talking about consumer food price index as a key inflation determinant. Now if I talk about food inflation, that that remains a major driver in the overall inflation, but it is not uniform across all the categories. Only certain items contribute significantly. Next, if I talk about the structure of the report, so you can see here in section 2 we'll see the analysis of the global inflation trend. Examination of India's inflation trend and influencing factors will be discussed in the section 3, and similarly recommendations we'll see in the section 4. Now this is the first, I would say, the section of it wherein we'll talk about the global resilience amid synchronized monetary policy tightening. Okay, now we are talking about synchronizing of the monetary policy tightening. So specifically, if I talk about monetary policy tightening, as in that RBI is continuously doing a thing, that RBI increasing the interest rate so that we can decrease the money supply in an economy. That is how RBI ensures that the money supply, or I would say the supply of money in an economy is getting controlled, because if there is an excess amount of money getting circulated in an economy, that also creates a problem. If there is excess supply of money in an economy, that means that people have more amount of money in their pocket, and whatever the amount of money is there in the pocket of people, of course they'll start spending it on purchasing goods and services. That is also a problematic situation. Why? Because producers then will increase the price. So it is a responsibility of the RBI to ensure that the prices of goods and services are getting stabilized. So that is the reason the RBI thought of going forward with the tightening of the monetary policy, wherein it is ensured that the interest rates are increased. So whatever the amount of money that people are spending on purchasing goods and services, the RBI wants to ensure that amount of money is going to the commercial banks in phase of paying off interest rate. So this is your monetary policy tightening is. So the survey here says that despite the monetary policy tightening, unusual level of resilience in output growth throughout the disinflationary process that is there. Now inflationary is the process is going inflation, there is a continuous increase in the goods and services. Now disinflationary shows that we are continuously forward in the decrease of the prices of goods and services. Efforts by the central bank to curb the inflation throughout the increase in the interest rate and other policy measures have been there that yield positive outcomes, resulting in the significant reduction in the inflationary process. So I have already told you this entire process. If you increase the interest rate, of course your prices will be decreased. Now we'll talk about this particular chart. So you can see here headline inflation that in easy across the country. So you can see here the case. Now in here particular this chart, monetary targeting that lowered inflation and stabilized the economic output globally. So you can see the data here. Okay. Now we'll talk about the decline in the core inflation. So I've already told you core inflation is your as in that there are goods and services that are linked here, but goods and services that are involved in the core inflation are excluding those goods and services which have volatile prices. Okay. So first, if I talk about food, food has what? Food has volatile prices. So it increases or decreases with the over the period of time. If you see the price in 1 week, if you compare the price with another week, of course there will be a fluctuation here. So those items are excluded here. That is known as your core inflation. Now we'll see what is survey saying here. So you can see in the alignment of the downward trend of the headline inflation, core inflation, which excludes your volatile food and energy prices, also had decreased in the most of the countries. Moderation and international commodity prices is there. It highlights the effectiveness of the policy intervention stabilizing the prices across the various sectors. Okay. Now you can see here the chart of core inflation that has been moderated, across the country. So you can see, if you see the first one, 4.5 rate is there, then 4, it comes to 4, and then it comes to 2.8. Specifically, if we talk about the change in the inflationary rate, so you can see the chart of Philippines and the rest of the countries. Now we'll talk about global food inflation that eases with the divergence in a few EMEs. Okay, that is your emerging markets. Okay. Now it also says that a downward trend is here. It has observed both your headline and your core inflation. The softening of the food, your food prices is there. Softening, some emerging economies like your Brazil, India and China have a contrasting pattern. Now we'll talk about the softening core inflation cools the headline inflation also. So if I talk about headline inflation that is measured by CPI, moderated in 2025 compared to 2024. Now there is a decline in, is primarily due to a significant decrease in the core inflation. There is a drop down by 0.9 percentage points between the financial year 2025 and 2024 and 25. There is a sharp decline in the core inflation that is largely driven by the core services that you have, and there is a lower of the core goods inflation. Now we'll see about the decrease in the fuel price inflation, that the moderation in headline inflation is there, that is increasing the pressure on household budgets. Similarly, if we talk about the decrease in the retail inflation, that is also there, that is attributed to a reduction in the input prices that is reflected in WPI as in the deflationary zone in 2024 and remained low in 2025. Similarly, you can see the chart here about the headline inflation, about the core inflation that is under control. So if I talk about the green line, that specifically shows about the CPI inflation here. So you can see it is lying near to 10%. Okay. Now if I talk about core inflation, that is in a dotted line, it is below the 10%. And similarly, if I talk about WPI, it is even below the 5%. So now here we are talking about the data of December 2024. Now if I talk about the persistent food inflation trend, so you can see that unlike global trend of declining in the inflation of the staple and the food prices, India ka jo food price hai, if food inflation hai, it has remained high over the past 2 years. Now again, there are specifically there are 3 reasons that are there. One is the after effect of your COVID-19, another one is your geopolitical war, another 2 of the factors that are contributing to what, that are contributing to this disruption in the supply chain. So that is the case here. Now what are the key reasons? So one, I told you, supply chain disruption, extreme weather events is also there, and the reduce in the harvest of the specific food prices is also there. Okay. Now we'll talk about the major contribution to the food inflation. Now what has contributed to the food inflation. So first you can see about the vegetables and pulses. So it holds 8.42 of the weightage in the CPI basket. Next, it contributed 32.3% the overall inflation in the financial year 2025. Now, excluding the vegetables and your pulses, food inflation drops to 4.3%, 4.1% lower than the actual food inflation. Headline inflation ki baat karo, so it has dropped down to 3.2%, 1.7% lower than the actual headline inflation. Okay. Now we'll talk about the impact of specific vegetables. Okay. Now we'll talk about tomato, or onion and potato. Okay. Now this is also referred to as top. Why? Because these are the the price, or I would say this is a particular type of food that is used in every household, in every vegetable. Okay. You will use tomato, you will use onion, and of course you use potato as well, because potato जो है वो हर एक vegetable, almost हर alternate vegetable पे क्या होता है, use होता है. ठीक है. So it has been referred to as top. So monsoon related supply chain disruption is there, which leads to a spike in the prices in tomatoes and your onions. Now excluding top vegetables, that is your tomato, your onion and your potato, whatever is there in the CPI baskets, you can see the food inflation lies at 6.5%. Similarly, if I talk about headline inflation, it is lying at 4.2%. Okay. Now we'll see the impact of specific vegetables that we have already seen. ठीक है. Now we'll talk about the tomato and the onion prices that have been the primarily drivers of the food inflation. Similarly, the next section will analyze the causes of the price pressures in these vegetables. So you can see the chart here. ठीक है. You can see that the food inflation that is driven by vegetables and pulses that have been shown here. Similarly, if I talk about this, this is inflation rate in the food inflation. So you can see the entire thing here. Now we'll see about the chart that is showing the increased peak in the retail prices of tomato, signaling the high volatility. Okay. Similarly, you can see the retail prices of the onions that remains elevated. If you see this, that it is uplifting here, and you can see the high volatility that is there. Now we'll see about the headline and food inflation that is driven by few of the food items. So one is your headline inflation, the one in the dotted section, red dotted section, another one in the purple line that is showing your headline excluding your top, that is your tomato, your onion and potato. Next, your the one in the parrot color that shows the headline excluding your vegetables and your pulses. Okay. Similarly, if I talk about CFPI excluding top and excluding vegetables and pulses, this is the entire data here. Okay. Now we'll see about the extreme weather conditions that is impacting your vegetable prices and your production. Okay. So vulnerability of the vegetables to extreme weather. So first you can see vegetables are more weather sensitive, okay, as compared to the food grains. We talked about vegetables are more weather sensitive as compared to food grains, and this is the reason that we see the condition of food supply chain disruption as well. Now extreme weather conditions includes what? Your cyclones, your floods, your hailstorms, your droughts, your unseasonal rainfall that highly contributes to the supply chain disruption here. Now if I talk about 2023-24, you can see the unseasonal pre-monsoon rainfall was there, and a lot of damage has been done to the vegetables and your horticulture process as well. Now we'll see about the extreme weather conditions, about the data here. So you can see the heat waves they have become more frequent, and you can see that over the period of time, every year we are concluding that the next year, the previous year was the hottest year. So similarly, if I talk about the today's year, we consider that 2024 was the hottest year till now. So things are getting deteriorated over the period of time. Every year we see that there is an increase in the this heat waves. So specifically, if we talk about 2022-24, heat waves occurred on 18% of days. 2022-21 se leke it occurred 5% of the 2024. So impact on the prices and supply chain. So high frequency of extreme weather events directly correlated with the higher vegetable prices, because this is directly leading to supply chain disruptions. That is the case here. Now storage and transport challenges as well, because I've told you many a times that our prices our food is is perishable in nature. You cannot store it for a longer period of time, because if you do so, it will get deteriorated. So that is the entire case. You need cold storage, and we lack in it. Okay. So this is what has been said here, that we lack in the storage and your transportation facilities. Next, if I talk about the production of onion and tomato, that is also declining from the last 2 years. Frequent extreme weather is a major driver of vegetables price volatility that is there. Addressing the climate related risk is essential to stabilize the vegetable and production and prices. Now if I talk about onion and onion inflation and your production trends, so you can see here that inflationary pressures remained high in financial year 2024-25 due to supply constraints from the lower production. Now if you see here the cycle, that is onion production cycle here, so you can see that it was grown in Rabi and your Kharif season. Similarly, 70% of the onions are produced in the Rabi season. Okay. Storage life, if I talk about the storage life of the onions here, so you can see that 2-3 months in a cool and dry places can be extended in a dehumidified environment as well. Now similarly, if I talk about the lower production in 2023 and 23-24, it impacted the supply, leading to the inflation in 2024-25. So you can see the thing started here in this year, but the after effects was there in 2024. Now tomato ki agar main baat karu, so the prices remained volatile in 2023 due to supply chain disruption. Challenges, what the challenges there? So short crop cycle and high perishability is there, and next storage and transportation, that is there. Now tomato production trends. So major production states are your Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Gujarat and Odisha. These are other major, producing states of tomato. Similarly, more than 65% of the tomato production happens in the Rabi season only. Regional concentration makes the supply chain vulnerable to disruption in the key areas. Now, if I talk about the onion, inflation is driven by reduced, production in the previous years. Tomato prices are again very volatile in nature due to, short shelf life, because you cannot store it for a longer period of time. Even if you see in your homes, if you, keep it outside of the fridge for even 2-3 days, तो वो खराब हो जाता है. So that is the case here. Now, addressing the storage and transportation challenges, it is a key method of stabilizing your onion and your tomato prices. Now, if I talk about the tariff and industrial policy, you can see that tariffs is what the disruption that has been put there. So it is fledging the industries, but require a calibrated approach here. Now, historically, if I talk about the industrialized in nations, they used high tariffs alongside your internal free market, your stabilizing of the banking system, your infrastructure investment, and your universal education. Okay. Now you can see the chart that talks about the heat waves increased in the last 3 years. So of course that is increasing over the period of time. That is 76 in the case of 2024. Rise in the crop area damaged due to weather conditions. So you can see the case of 2024. It is even above than 3. Now, if I talk about the trends in the onion and tomato production and prices, so you can see the number of the days with the heat waves in the in the year of 2020. So I think almost of the regions are green in color. Similarly, if you talk about 2024, so you can see the case here, extreme or more than 30 is there in most of the regions. Onion and tomato, onion and tomato, tomato. So onion. So rest, if I talk about the the orange one, that is lying between 20 and 30. So you can see the case here also, onion, tomato. Now, if I talk about the production versus consumption trends, now here we are calculating or we are managing that what is the gap between your demand and supply. So you can see that the production, domestic production exceeds the your household consumption for both of the onions and tomatoes. So here it is said that supply is more and the demand is less. Now, bulk consumption accounts for 15% of the total production. Now, if I talk about the price pressure that arises because of the post harvest losses that is there, seasonal production fluctuations and the regional dispersion of the production here. Now, similarly, if I talk about the export import challenges, so onion export has been average 6% of the domestic production. Now, if I talk about the limiting of the import options for the onion and tomatoes, that is due to the India, China together account for 50% of the global onion production. One is the case here. Now, in the next 8 largest onion producing countries contribute only 18%. So that is also the case here. Now, if I talk about tomatoes that are perishable in nature, it restricts the import feasibility from the neighboring countries which are not major producers. Okay. Now, if I talk about the seasonal price variation, so you can see tomato prices rise during the lean monsoon season. This is the reason here that due to the lower production and high transit losses are there. Onion price जो rise करता है, that is due to the seasonal supply chain shortages. Now, if I talk about the price fluctuations, they are driven by various reasons here. One is your post harvest losses that is there, and another one is your seasonal production pattern. Similarly, you have regional supply imbalances that rather than your fundamental production shortfall. Similarly, you have India's import limitation that make it difficult to stabilize the prices during the shortages, emphasizing the need for a better storage and your supply chain management. Okay. Now you can see the trends in the onion production across regions. So you can see the case here that it is what is the case here, it is 30.2% here, and similarly if I talk about 2023-24, we are comparing them both, it has been declined to what? It has been declined to 24.2%. Now we'll see about the tomato production in across the region. So we can see that it has been bifurcated, or comparison has been done, that it is now 21.3. If I compare it with 1920, so it was 21.2%. Okay. Now, if I talk about the household consumption, that is lower than the production here. So you can see in case of onion, production is what? That is pink in color. So you can see the production is more, household consumption is less. Similar is the case with the 3 years, three continuous financial years here. Similarly, we talk about 2021, there is a lot of gap here. Similarly, if I talk about here, the gap has been reduced if you compare it with 2021-22. Similarly, if you see the case here, that is I would say things are stagnant here, the difference between the household consumption and the production. So this is the entire case here. Now I'll talk about the impact of production decline on inflation. So tur dal, this is one of the types of dal. Okay. Now the pulses contributed to food inflation in 2024-25 April due to the deficient production here. production that is declined, compared to 5-year average. That is the case here. If I talk about 2022-23, lower of 13.6%, 2023-24 lower of 10.8%. Okay. Now if I talk about the negative correlations here that has been lagged between the production and inflation here, so that is minus 0.8%. Lower of production in 1 year, that is there in a high inflation in the next year. As major kharif pulse, that is tur, it is harvested in the season of November January, that is impacting the prices of the following financial year. Now what are the government measures? So you can see that stock limits are there. Okay. Next, stock disclosure is there. Imports are decreased by bridging the demand supply gap. Next, you have 7.7 lakh tons of imports that have been done here in financial year 2024. Major sources, if I talk about Mozambique, your Tanzania, your Malawi and your Myanmar, these are the major sources here. Okay. Now you will see about the supply shortages that is there in the past 2 years has been driven by the tur dal inflation. Now government interventions are there. Now how government intervenes? One is through your stock monitoring, your imports, your supply measures that aim to control the price measures. Now if you see the chart here, you can see that the trends of tur dal production and inflation, that if we talk about this, it is lying above 3% and above 4%. That is the entire case here. Now we'll see about the inflation projections. If we talk about RBI and IMF, they expected India's inflation will lie with the targets in financial year 2026. RBI jo revise that the revised your inflation projections were कि 2025 it increased from 4.5% to 4.8%. Similarly, if I talk about for financial year 2026, so it is expected कि 4.2% के आसपास रहेगा. Similarly, if I talk about IMF projection, so you can see the case of financial year 2025 that is lying at 4.1%. Similarly, if I talk about 26, so IMF is projecting कि यहाँ पे 4.1% के something रहेगा. Commodity price index की अगर मैं बात करूँ, according to World Bank October 2024, so you can see that global commodity prices declined to 5.1% in 2025. Similarly to 1.7% in 2026 is expected. Price trends की अगर बात करूँ, so oil price to fall while natural gas price are increasing or rising. Gold prices are expected to decline. Silver prices are to increase, metals and mineral prices to decline, and similarly if I talk about the global commodity prices, that is lower. Positive impact is on the global, your domestic inflation is there. Similarly, if I talk about the agriculture outlook and your food inflation, so here you see the case of normal southwest monsoon of the condition of 2024. So the improvement in the water availability is there for irrigation purposes. Kharif food grain production 2024 से लेके 2025 to increase by 5.7%. Rise in the prices of rice is by 5.9%. Tur dal mein hai 2.5%. It is likely to ease the your food inflationary prices that has been said here. Risk, what are the risks here basically? So rising in the global vegetable oil price, it may drive the food inflation here. Now similarly, if I talk about the government measures, so you can see strengthening of the buffer stock of the essential food prices, periodic open market release and the subsidized retail sales that is there, easing of the imports throughout, or I would say through the duty rationalization, prevention of hoarding via stock limits and monitoring that is there. Now specifically if I talk about the budget 2024-25, so you can see large scale vegetable production cluster is there. Now so it supports the your farmer producer organization, that is your FPOs. Similarly, it will help your cooperatives and your startups as well. Now the entire purpose is on the self-sufficiency efforts in the prices or in the pulses and your oil seeds, that maximum we produce here only and we should not be dependent on the rest of the countries. Now we'll talk about the long-term price stability measures. So what are they? Addressing the production deficits in pulses and your oil seeds, developing your climate resilient crop varieties to improve the yield and to reduce the losses, expanding your pulse cultivation in the rice fallow region. Next, improvement in the farmer training and extension services, that includes your best agricultural practices and the use of disease resilient seeds. Similarly, we talk about the targeted interventions for key crops, that includes your pulses, your tomatoes, your onions. Specifically, we'll talk about the enhancement of the data collection and monitoring. How can we increase that? So robust of tracking of prices, stocks and your storages is there at the multiple levels. High frequency of monitoring, price monitoring, that is linked to farm gate to consumer for the better, I would say, the policy decisions that is there. Okay. Now we'll see about the inflation expectations. So it is likely to get moderated in financial year 26. But if I specifically talk about the food inflation, that risk is still persistent here. Okay. Now we'll talk about the government protective policies that are there. So you can see that the government protective policies are already there. Now it impacts, or I would say the global price trends are also there, that will play a key role in the inflationary prices, or I would say in the stability of the inflation. Now if I talk about the long-term solution, that what can be the long-term solution, so you can see focus should be on the climate resilience. Next, supply chain improvement की तरफ focus होना चाहिए, and you should try entirely focusing entirely focus on the monitoring of the better data here. ठीक है. Now we'll see about the questions. Now you can see the paragraph in front of you. ठीक है. It is being said that food inflation measures by the A faced pressures in financial year 2025 April से लेके December तक. Now primarily driven by food inflation, or I would say few food items such as vegetables and pulses. Vegetables and pulses together holds a total weightage of B in CPI basket. However, their contribution to the overall inflation stood at C in the financial year 2025. When these items are excluded, the average food inflation rate of 2025 was D, which is 4.1% lower than the overall food inflation. Similarly, if I talk about the average headline inflation, would be E, when vegetables and pulses inflation rate were excluded, 1.7% lower than the actual headline inflation. So you have paragraph in front of you. You have to now tell me that what refers to A, B, C, D and E. So first question we have is, food inflation is measured by what? CPI, WPI, CPI, industrial worker, and CFPI or PPI. So the correct option we have is CFPI. Now next question we have is, vegetables and pulses together holds a total weightage of B in CPI basket. This is 7%, 8.42%, 9.50%, 5%, if it 12%. So the answer we have is 8.42%. Now we'll talk about the vegetables and pulses together contribute dash to the overall inflation here. So what is the answer? Is it 30%, 32.3%, 5%, 7.60%, or is it 10%? So the correct answer we have is 32.3%. Similarly, what does D refer to? Is it 5%, 8.3%, 4.3%, 10%, if it's 6.50%? So the correct answer we have is 4.3% here. Similarly, we have last question here with us. What does E refer to? Is it 5%, 6.25%, 8.72%, 2%, if it's 3.2%? So the correct answer we have is 3.2%. Okay. Now this comes to an end of our entire chapter of price and inflation. We just decoded that how things are going, how inflation has been going, and what were the after effects of the things, what were the factors that are contributing to the increase in the inflation or increase in the prices over the period of time. So I hope you have understood the entire chapter. Similarly, tomorrow we'll go towards the in the next class we'll go towards the completion of 5th chapter as well. So in case you have any doubt, you can just write in the comment section कि मैम ये जो है मेरे को doubt है, you just clarify it. So I hope you have liked the video. We'll see in the next one. Thank you so much.